Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 55.
No, Ben. This is episode 10 again.
What?
It's 10 again. So this is one of those really fun things about math where it just constantly folds back in on itself depending on how you look at it. And so we are actually in episode 55, but that is the 10th Fibonacci number.
Oh, but like the conch shell spiral thing.
Yes, exactly. So this still I know people don't like it when I bring up the hardcore math stuff, but the Fibonacci sequence is one of those things that it intrigues me because it points to like the underlying rules of the universe in ways that we don't understand, and that is so fascinating because
So it's not logarithmic, it's not exponential, but it's still cyclical in a way.
yeah, if anybody doesn't know what the Fibonacci sequence is, it's just you take the two numbers previously in the sequence, add them together, and that's the next number in the sequence. So it's 1, 1, 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 1 is 3, 3 and 2 is 5, 5 and 3 is 8, 8 and 5 is 13, to 21, to 34, to 55. And it keeps going on.
We are. Okay.
Which is where we're at. But like, it shows up everywhere. Like in nature, like you're talking about, artichokes. The leaves on an artichoke follow the Fibonacci sequence. Pineapples. The little spikes that grow out of the pineapples follow the Fibonacci sequence. Pine cones. You look at a pine cone as you spiral around it, it follows the Fibonacci sequence. And it's not just that, it also shows up in other mathematical things, like the golden ratio. The Fibonacci sequence is an excellent approximation of the golden ratio in mathematics. And that's not the only place it shows up, but that's the only like example that people are going to readily have available.
Excellent. So hopefully by the time we've finished recording episode 55, we'll have achieved some type of golden harmony with the universe.
I'm just shooting for this episode should be as good as the previous two episodes combined.
Or at least as good as episode 10.
Ah, there you go. Love it.
This week, I think you were remodeling your bathroom or something, and you're like, dude, I don't have time to like put this into notes, but write this down for me. Put down the one. I'm like, the one? You're like, yes, the one. I'm like, okay. So I went into OneNote where we keep all our notes that we use to organize the stuff we're going to talk about, and I put down the one, but I don't know what you're talking about.
OneNote, sponsor us. Okay, no, but this is, I don't do follow-up very often. But when we were doing the episode about my religious beliefs, we talked a lot about like the whole journey that I had.
Uh-huh.
But we didn't talk a lot about how I feel about or think about the universe or my current thoughts and whatever are. And I don't know. It's a weird place to go. So, but just for follow-up to give people an idea, one thing that I've heard that I really, really liked was if I was to buy into religion and metaphysics and all of that. In the third book of the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, my favorite author, he has a little vignette where one of his characters talks about their religion, and it is the religion of the One. And in the beginning, there was one, and the One knew everything, but had experienced nothing. So the One created all of the universe and then split his self into all of the separate beings that are in the universe in order to experience all things. And when those individuals die, they return to the One and bring their collective experiences back to it. So that eventually, at the end of the cycle, you'll have the One that is all-knowing and has experienced all things.
Wow.
So that was just, I've seen that concept before in other places. There's a wonderful Kyrgyzstan video called The Egg that's on YouTube that kind of talks about kind of the
I've
same
watched
thing.
that one.
It's
we'll put a link in the show notes.
And it just got me thinking about if I was to really buy into something, or what would I want out of a religion? And what I realized is all of the pain, like the emotional pain, not the physical pain, but all the emotional pain that I have ever suffered in my life has always come from some form of miscommunication or misunderstanding between me and the other things, the other beings that exist in this universe. Okay?
Yeah.
So if there was to be some kind of afterlife, I would like it to be like a returning to a singular consciousness where then I could compare and contrast like my experiences with the experiences of those around me and reconcile the differences that caused all of this emotional turbulence in my life.
I find myself having a similar thought to that. Tell me if this is the same idea you're expressing. Sometimes after a disagreement with my wife, I'll walk away and feel the feelings you feel of frustration and confusion. And then I'll think, gosh, I hope sometime in the eternities there's like instant replay where we get to go back and redo this and she gets to see this from my perspective.
Sort of like that, except mine's a little more like, oh, we'll both be the same consciousness, so all of those differences will be completely and perfectly understood. It goes back to the idea that any form of communication is imperfect because ideas in our heads are so multifaceted. Like it's impossible for me to take the exact idea that I have and translate it into your brain. You can get an approximation of it or something close, but it's always going to be skewed by your perspective, your experiences, the way that I portrayed it to you. It's not going to be exactly the same thing.
I'm saying yes and nodding, but actually, Josh, I have no idea what you're talking about right now. How could I?
I was going to launch into why aren't you listening to me? But no,
I can tell you're about to bluster.
You're being facetious. Ha ha ha! Got me.
All right. So I got a question for you that I was thinking about when we were doing this last time. Does your family name their automobiles?
Not everyone in my family names their automobiles, but I tend to anthropomorphize my automobiles more than the rest of my family does.
Okay, I'm digging it. So have you named the electric car yet? The Volkswagen ID4?
So yes, I have been calling my new car Jennifer.
Okay, go on.
That's it. There's just, originally it was going to be... Yes, that's it. That's all there is to it. Like, I don't know. I when I get to places that I go to, I like rubber dash for a second and let her know, hey, thanks for being a good car and getting me here. Stuff like that.
Josh, you're speaking to my heart. But why Jennifer?
There's literally no reason. There's no justification. Originally, I was going to call it Jessica, but I realized I work with a Jessica, and that would be weird. So I stuck with the J and went with Jennifer.
Excellent. Okay, what about your truck that you just traded in to get Jennifer? Did it have a name?
Kind of.
Wait. Trucks don't feel like you could give them female names here, and you're running through female names. Did it have a female name?
It was absolutely going... I didn't. So my truck didn't really have a name. I anthropomorphized my truck, but I never called her by a name. It was always a she, and I always thanked her, but I never thanked her by name, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got it. It was thank you.
Yes, thank you, truck. You've been great.
Yeah.
And I feel, honestly, I remember when I traded it in and they said, all right, go get all your stuff out of your truck. And like, I had a moment where I just sat there with her and was like, well, thanks for everything. Like, you've been a great truck and I'm sorry, but I have to move on. And like, do the thing where you like dramatically turn away and like, no, I have to go.
Okay. I have a core memory about this. I may have been 7 years old when my dad finally had to sell his first car. It was a 1973 Dodge Dart Swinger. It had a flat six. It was like sun-faded powder blue, and it was a piece of crap. And my dad learned everything he knows about fixing cars from the fact that that thing was constantly broken. But he poured so much of his heart and soul into it that when our family finally outgrew it and he had to get rid of it because we didn't fit it anymore, he cried. And I've never seen my dad cry about anything ever before in my life. So to see him doing, my dad is like a dirt-eating manly man. So to see him crying about getting rid of his first car really had an impact on me as a 7-year-old. Like, my dad can cry?
I think Ron Swanson says that crying is reserved for funerals and the Grand Canyon, and that's it.
I think Ron Swanson would make an exception for getting rid of your first car.
Obviously. Like, your dirt-eating manly man dad cried. And you know what? There's no problem with that. There would be a guy walking up to him off the street like, what are you crying about? Yes, sissy. Like, oh, I'm selling my first car. Oh, bro, I've been there.
Yeah,
like,
get it.
Give him the shoulder hug and move on.
Yeah, so so our cars tend to get names, but we do it by committee in my family now a bit. The one that belongs to me, I got to name it, but the other family ones we kind of name, we influence, but eventually just something sticks. So we have 3 cars right now. There's a minivan that my daughter's named Matilda, named after the beloved Roald Dahl book. There's my 2007 Acura TL that will be the next thing I write an essay and make a video about.
Ooh, look forward to that.
I inherited her as the second owner after she'd gotten like 210,000 miles. But she was pristine, like perfectly maintained, fully recorded, no problems. Perfect exterior, perfect interior. So I thought of her as a well cared for older woman. So I called her Jackie, named after Jackie Onassis Kennedy. So my car is Jackie.
What about the truck?
So we got Matilda, Jackie, and the truck. And
The truck got named after something we did on the podcast.
Ooh, interesting.
I told you about getting the truck and told you it was from Texas, and you started making silly jokes about buying things in Texas and what they come included with. And I told you it came with a pair of boots, and that stuck. So that's the name of the truck.
Boots?
Yep.
That's like a pet name. That's not like a person name.
I know, but it's great. It fits it now.
Is your
Boots
now,
the truck.
You were all up in a tizzy that I had anthropomorphized my truck as a female. Is your truck female?
No. Boots is I don't know. Yeah, it's like you said, it's like a dog.
Wow. So your other vehicles are like at the level of people. They're like friends and trusted companions. But your truck is what, like a tool? Like a horse?
Yeah, like that.
My truck was a companion, but that's fine.
Listeners, this is your chance. You can go to reddit.com/r/baditmagic. I'll have an open thread for episode 55. Let's hear your vehicle names. What do you call your cars?
I have no response to that.
Okay, so you were, as if there weren't enough things for you to be angry about this week, you had an experience last week where there's something gone on at your kid's school related to COVID, and I want to hear about it.
Oh.
We haven't talked about it yet. We've only exchanged angry texts.
Yes, quite angry. So, it was the long weekend, and this whole long weekend I was focused on just trying to get my shower completed. And
as in the Labor Day holiday.
Yeah, the Labor Day holiday. Yes, excuse me. This past September 2021, for those of you from the far future listening to my voice. Hope it's better. While we're on the subject, big shout out to my dad, the registered contractor, who spent almost as many hours in my shower that weekend as I did, making sure I didn't screw things up with my, I'll just throw it on the wall, it'll be fine kind of mentality.
Yeah.
So thanks, Dad, for helping me out with that.
Right on.
So anyway, we spent the whole weekend I was just doing that and completely focused on it. And my kids went back to school on not Tuesday, because Monday was Labor Day, and then Tuesday they randomly had off because kids don't even freaking go to school anymore, I guess. But then they went to school on Wednesday, and then while they were at school on Wednesday, like very early in the morning, it was like 9 or 10 o'clock, my wife and I both got this text message saying, your first grader is under quarantine for COVID exposure. And then they named a date, which was the following Monday. And that was it. That was our only explanation. We're like, can we get a little more information about this, please?
Yeah.
And, I was working in the office, so my wife was the one that was at home. And so she called the school, and it was just, that's their process. If your child is exposed to COVID, then they go on quarantine for 2 weeks, or 10 business days, or until you produce a negative COVID test. But, and then when the follow-up question is, obviously, like, today is Wednesday, she's only quarantined for the remainder of this week, that's not 10 business days. And they said, oh, she was exposed last Monday. Like, a full 7 or 9 days before that.
Okay, I know you probably weren't thinking about this at the time, but do you have any idea how much, if the school is having friction with any of the other parents? In which
direction? Because in the town that I live
guess
in,
both.
The answer is yes, they are, and the answer is from both sides, because I know that there are parents complaining about this COVID protocol at all. Like, oh, my kid is fine. I don't care about exposure. Like, they're not even sick. You need to take my kid. This whole COVID thing is
right.
I
can't deal with this. I got to go to work.
Yeah, I can't deal with your 5G conspiracies. Just take my kid. Then on the other end of the spectrum is parents like me that are like, it's not really hard to wear a mask or space out or, I don't know, provide online learning. The entire school system spun itself up from nothing and created an entire academic program for K through 8 online distance learning, and then completely scrapped it because we don't feel like doing that anymore. Just one of my many pet peeves. But
I don't know. Let's talk about that for a sec, because there is that kind of thing happening all over the place where we proved all these concepts, and now we're like, just kidding, go back to the way things were before.
Well,
why is that?
I don't. Well, in Arizona, I live in Arizona. This specific topic is so highly politicized, and that's what gets my dander up about it. It's not because we're making decisions based on the facts or reality or the data or the number of COVID cases that are spiking in the state. We're making these based on the fact that our governor, who is a hardcore staunch Republican and is term limited, so he's done being governor, is shooting for some Washington, D.C. post somewhere, is trying to get in good with his political party. And so he flat made it illegal for a school to mandate masks, and then is using federal funding for the schools, holding it over their heads and saying, if you have a mask mandate, you will not receive your federal funding.
Yeah, and this is causing a lot of political friction. There's like 6 other states, I think, that have also done that. Notably Texas and Florida.
I'm against that. I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't want to wear a mask, that's fine. Why are you so actively... Whatever. You know what? I'm not going to go down there because we're not going to go down the COVID political rabbit hole again. Here's my problem, is my wife went to pick up my daughter from the school, and while she was there was like 24 other parents that were all picking up their children due to COVID exposure. Every grade level. Like, there was dozens of children that had to be pulled out of the school because they'd been exposed to COVID. But because of the reporting procedures that our district has put into place, they are only checked once a week, the first day of school. Wednesday was the first day of school. They checked the list. Oh, crap, there's a ton of kids. We need to call these parents and get them out of here. Not let's prevent them from coming to school or notify the parents beforehand or notify the parents anytime remotely near when they were first exposed to the deadly virus.
So you're saying they knew this before the holiday weekend and didn't tell you guys until after you'd already dropped them off the following week?
Because of the bureaucracy, I don't know when the school knew.
Okay. But
somebody knew earlier than Wednesday morning is my... I don't know how the reporting process goes. But that in itself is a problem. Like, my child was confirmed exposed to COVID, and I didn't find out until 10 days later. I mean, that's a problem.
Have you ever had a situation in your life where you're in the school's position? Like, no matter what you do, somebody's going to be pissed off. If you do something, they're going to be mad. If you don't do something, they're going to be mad. If you make it harder, it's going to be mad. If you make it easier, it's going to be mad. Like, there's no winning for the school.
So, if you're in a no-win scenario, you stop looking at that as criteria. If the parents are going to be mad no matter what we do, then we need to do the thing that's best for the students.
People don't agree on that right now.
That's the problem. It goes back to this whole political game theory again. Like, it's not about the parents. It's not about the safety of the children. It's now about who's getting political slaps on the back or political visibility for decisions that are being made that affect and impact people that don't have any control over this. Like, I would be 100 times, I'd be completely fine with this if my kids were vaccinated. My kids aren't. So I have vested interest in the decisions that are being made at this level.
Yeah. Well, maybe they'll figure out a vaccine they can give to kids soon.
Yeah, that's what we're waiting on.
All right. Completely different subject that came up this week. You and I were discussing online streaming music services, and I want to go down this rabbit hole a little bit.
Okay.
So I was driving in a car the other day, and I pondered what it was like when I first learned to drive back in the 90s. You know, you were driving someplace, you finally got your driver's license, and you felt that first taste of freedom where you could go wherever you want. You'd roll down the window, and you'd turn on the radio, and you would get the radio experience, which includes ads, static, poor reception, maybe not a great selection, and you would do the thing where you wrestle with the stations and try to find one that you feel like adjusts to your taste, or maybe switch stations when an ad comes on, or whatever your experience was. And that was like the experience of my entire life, from as long as I can remember as a kid all the way up until like the mid 2000s. That was the free streaming music experience, DJs and the whole lot.
Do you know what the worst part of that experience was?
What?
And actually still is when you're listening to a station and you like the station, it plays music you like, and the song ends and it goes into the ads, and so you go to your second favorite station and it's on ads, and you go to the next station and it's on ads.
Yeah, it feels like they're synchronizing, even though they probably aren't. But yeah,
I mean, we say that they're probably not, but who knows? Maybe they are.
Okay, so I told that story and gave that vignette because I want that to be the baseline. That's the alternative to what we're going to talk about now.
Okay, which is the various streaming platforms for music.
Yeah, well, and there was another alternative, and I think it's a good analog here, and that is manually choosing your music. You know, about
halfway through my youth, they started to come out with cars that came with cassette players and CD players and stuff, where then you could go through the manual effort of somehow acquiring music and getting it onto a cassette or a CD and then playing that in the car. And if it was just one CD, it was maxed out at like 60 minutes of music and it just played on a loop. And, so you would listen to that same, if it was one artist, then you just listen to that one artist. If it was some type of mix, it just was on a loop. So then you didn't have ads and you didn't have static, but it was still a very small selection of music.
Oh man, every once in a while you date yourself and you remind me just how freaking old you are.
This is only 7 years difference. That's how fast this has changed in our lifetime.
You say that. My first vehicle, I remember, it had a stock radio, and it was an old Jeep Comanche pickup truck that I treated like dirt, and it was exactly what I needed for a high school kid. But I remember replacing the radio with a CD player, and I specifically chose a CD player that recognized MP3
CDs. So then how much music are you talking about?
Oh, man, I had my whole library on there. I had subfolders.
But how many hours? Like 100 hours?
Probably like 100 hours, yeah.
Okay, so then you went from 60 minutes to 100 hours, which is a huge leap, but it still was incredibly manually intensive to create or gather all those MP3s, create the playlist in such a way that with the rudimentary interface of a car stereo, you could get to the right playlists or tracks and hear what you want to hear.
That is valid, yes. It was intensive. It's a lot of pre-planned effort. But once you did it all up front, then you were good to go.
Okay. But still, you were limited to that 100 hours of music. So now I think that the enabling technology underlying the idea of streaming music services is the ubiquity of mobile internet.
FCC, if you're listening, just admit it. High-speed internet is a utility. Just deal with
it. Well, how does the FCC, what's the connection?
Oh, dude, all of the things. What is this is a big buzzword a few years back was and I can't remember the word off the top of my head, like net freedom or free networks or something.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
I kind of think of that either.
Yeah, exactly. Tip of the tongue syndrome. No, but FCCs are the ones that dictate who a common carrier is and dictate what is considered a utility. And what's
but I'm not remembering
business.
What the conflict is. What is it that the FCC is doing that would or wouldn't influence the ability to have streaming music?
Well, no, it changes the way that the high-speed internet industry functions if it's considered a utility and falls under those certain protections versus a for-profit business that's allowed to do all of the shady things that all the Comcasts do out there.
Okay. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. You and I do not see eye to eye on this. Okay, so back to this. There's another possibility, and that is all of the producers, as they do in the past, when you're a business that receives a revenue stream through the traditional layout of things, as they saw people like MP3 CDs becoming more and more ubiquitous, they're like, people aren't willing to deal with static and poor reception and those kinds of things, or, if they're driving across the country. So let's find a way to provide them still the traditional radio experience. How do we do that? Well, what if we had satellites that broadcast radio instead of towers on the ground that broadcast radio? So there's this push in like the late 90s, early 2000s for XM satellite radio. Even my car has it.
My car currently has it. I'm at the end of my free trial. I will not be renewing it because I didn't even turn it on once.
Yeah.
Remember, my wife...
I'm not interested in the legacy radio experience, even if it's coming from space.
I agree, but here's the thing, though, is when XM first came out, it was a subscription service, and there were no ads. And so that's a game changer. Like, you subscribe to XM radio, you got the radio, you turn on the station, no ads, no DJs, you just got music. And then slowly but surely, the ads started creeping in as XM realized that, well, hey, we can monetize the crap out of this.
Yeah, to me, this is still the same. And I think you and I have talked about this on the podcast before. The difference between streaming video and the cable TV experience, where what XM is giving you is a lot, but it's still they're curating it. They're determining what's going to be on it. They figure out what plays right at certain times of day, what kind of programs or audiences are going to be listened to, and it restricts the ability of the internet to provide what we've talked about in the past is called the long tail, which is people's interests are so varied that the more
flexibility you give them, the more you'll find out that the things people are interested in are well outside that mainstream norm center of the bell curve.
Got it. And so this is your problem again with the traditional radio experience, where it's being curated by a third party, assuming what you want.
Yes. And there's really no individualism of it. And that's what the internet offers. You know, when you are interacting with the service that's giving you what you want, you can say, I like that. I don't like that. I want to skip from that one to the next one. I want to change to something a little bit different, but give me suggestions based on my past choices.
I want to listen to a podcast about two guys talking about random things on the internet. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Support our Patreon.
So now 80% of streaming music is given through 4 main services.
Wow, really?
It's 75%.
Oh, well, 75 is different. But still, all right, 3/4 of all of the world's music is listened to through 4 services. What are they, Ben?
Okay, this is streaming music, which is gaining. I'll put some graphs. There's some great graphs out there that show how basically the market share of radio stations is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and you can see that this is growing at almost the same rate. So this is what's consuming it. It's not XM radio, it's not MP3 CDs, it's streaming music services. So the big one obviously is Spotify.
Yep, gotta love Spotify.
Second place is Apple Music.
For all of you dirty Apple lovers out there.
So back in 2019, Spotify had a 35% market share. Apple Music has 19%, and then closely followed by Amazon Music, which has a 15% market share, and then and then a 6% market share, and then 25-ish% is everything else. The 6% market share is Apple Music, formerly Google Play.
Oh, you meant to say YouTube Music?
YouTube Music.
Okay, yeah, formerly Google Play, which is what I had. And I ranted about that a few episodes back when Google Play expired and forced me to transition to YouTube Music.
Okay, so have you tried any of these? Have you used any of them?
I have used all of these, with the exception of Apple Music. I will not allow Apple one toe in my house because that ecosystem will take over like a virus.
That's interesting that you say that, because I recently unsubscribed from Apple Music. And all of our phones are Apple phones. So now I use my Apple phone to listen to other streaming music services.
Yeah, for now. Just wait. Apple will lock that down. They'll figure out a way to take their 30% out of that one too. No, but the primary that I go to is Spotify. But I have used YouTube Music. Obviously, that's where my music library lives. So I don't use a lot of their streaming. But like if I'm on there listening to my music, I can switch over to their playlist every once in a while. And then we didn't even know Amazon Music existed until Prime gave us one of their great, wonderful, giant pop-up window ads when we went to Amazon. It's like, did you know we have music too? And I was just in the mood where it's like, really, Amazon, tell me about your music. But then, of course, we actually listened to it nonstop for like a month without realizing that we thought it just came with Prime. And then it said, oh, your trial is now over, so here's all the ads.
Yeah. So here's been my experience with it. The first one I tried was Apple Music. And initially I was following the traditional ecosystem of paying for digital content. So technically I own some music, even though I have access to all of it as anytime I want now. But there's a few albums and songs that I paid, like 99 cents each or $6 for, or whatever the prices were. So that was how Apple Music got their toe in the door. But I finally was just like, you know what? I just want to be able to listen to everything. It's $6 or $7 a month doesn't seem that bad, for the fact that I can just pick whatever I want at any time. Like I own all the albums.
Right. So it sounds like you've subscribed to a premium service.
Yes. So I subscribed to Apple Music. Premium service for $6 or $7 a month. I don't remember what it is, and had a really good experience with it. It just is so comforting to, like, anything you can think of, you can listen to, and you don't got to pay anything else. It's like you're renting the world's largest music library, and it didn't feel like there were any holes in it. There was nothing I could think of that wasn't on there.
I see, that's interesting, because other people would look at this from the opposite perspective of art belongs to the world and belongs to everybody. Finally, we have a vehicle where anybody can experience all of the things that the world's artists have to offer.
It's because we've disguised the costs of it. Like, oh, you can just turn on the radio anytime you want and listen to music for free. It doesn't cost you anything. Yes, it does. It costs you listening to ads.
So I've heard somewhere that the number one thing in our information-driven society right now, the currency that everybody's after, is human attention.
Yes. I really like the way they portrayed this on the film
Wreck-It Ralph 2, Ralph Breaks the Internet. I know you said you hated that movie, but there's a real good sequence in the middle. I'll see if I can find a clip and put it in the show notes, where just they depict all of the people paying attention to things. Like they're just these little blips and their attentions are very fickle. And as long as they're paying attention, it's good. But if you stop being interesting for just a second, the attention goes away.
Yeah, I mean, that's how the internet works.
So, I recently stopped paying for Apple Music, partly because of the ecosystem problem. So we started getting Amazon Echo devices, Alexa, and it will play with Apple Music, but not nicely. It's like, okay, we'll integrate with it because we have to, but we're going to make it difficult for you. Like sometimes it would inexplicably not work or quit, and it would only ever play on one device at a time, and it got kind of frustrating. So then I got like the student price for Amazon Prime. I was on Amazon Prime, and now I stopped connecting it to Apple Music, and we just listen. Anytime I'm asking Alexa to play me a song, it's coming off of Amazon Music.
So wait, did you not have Amazon Prime before that?
On and off.
How? What? Okay, I think of Amazon Prime as a utility bill again in my house. This is just something I have to have.
No, I like that the world is making this transformation, and folks, you're hearing it happen on this podcast. We're adopting these things at different rates and on different time scales.
We have been Prime subscribers for years. Like $14 a month to get free shipping on the hundreds of things that come into my house.
So you were like, yet another thing I didn't realize I was paying for, I get for free, this music service. Great.
I thought, but the music doesn't come with just Amazon Prime. It
doesn't?
Well, there's a Prime music service. Apparently there's another tier of music service that's outside of that.
Okay, whatever I'm paying for must include that. And maybe, I don't know, it comes along with owning an Alexa or something. Okay, so that explains why you were complaining about Spotify this week. So what was the problem with Spotify?
So Spotify has been my go-to for a while now, and I really enjoy a bunch of the playlists that they have on there. I have a couple of go-tos. Like, it's good. I like Spotify. The fact that other people make these playlists, I like that because other people are better than the curated experiences you're talking about from corporations. But my biggest problem with Spotify is we had it premium. We paid for it for a while, and then we stopped paying for it. Now we have the ads. And two things. One, they lie to me about the ads. They say, oh, watch this 30-second video, and then you get 30 minutes free. And I'll watch the video, and then I'll listen to one song, and then I'll get another ad. Spotify, you've got to fix that algorithm.
You called that a lie, but you're right. That is just an outright, bold-faced lie.
Yeah. Spotify, fix that. Like that's going to make me break my device in frustration one of these days. The other thing that was bothering me is, so I have a Bluetooth speaker that I had playing in my bathroom while I'm remodeling my shower. From sunup to sundown for 5 days straight over the long weekend, I was working in that room listening to Spotify music. Ben, if I have to listen to the ad for Poise like panty liners one more time, I'm going to go postal.
Supposed to know something about you? Like, does it think you need those?
Well, I've complained about it so much that I haven't heard one yet today. So I'm thinking that they finally, like all the devices listening to me have finally registered that I don't like that ad and I'm sick of hearing it.
Now, when you say complained about it, what's the mechanism for that?
Oh, well, I just assume that all of my devices that have microphones are recording my voice and sending it to some AI algorithm.
Oh, so you're not formally interfacing with this thing. Because I know, like, when I use Spotify on a computer, if an ad comes up I don't like, there's a little button in the corner you can say, I don't like this ad. And then it won't play it again.
You know, I've started trying to do that for YouTube, but I haven't noticed any difference.
Okay.
Anyway, no, I was... this is the same way, like, if you start talking to your spouse about buying a new mattress, next time you go to YouTube, you're going to get mattress ads. Like, it just happens. It's a little creepy and a little 1984-ish, but
yeah,
like, I don't care.
That happened to me today. My daughter and I were in the car listening. We were having a conversation. We were talking about music. I started talking about Taylor Swift, and then the next song that came on from my streaming music service was Taylor Swift.
Well, to be fair, like I think 90% of all popular songs for the last decade are Taylor Swift songs.
Well, okay, so that brings up the fourth music service, which is YouTube Music. And I currently use that as my streaming music service on my mobile device instead of Apple or Amazon, even though I currently have Amazon. And I've never used Spotify. I've used it a little bit. But YouTube Music, and I like it.
It is included with my YouTube Premium subscription.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, you're paying for YouTube, so don't talk to me about.
I get it, but those two things go together, and I like it. It feels like a lot of good value. Like if it was just one or the other, it might not feel like enough. But being able to watch anything I want on YouTube with no ads and have full access to their music streaming service feels like I'm getting good value for my money.
All of this is going back to that Black Mirror episode, 10 million credits or something. Did you ever see that one?
No. Tell me about it.
There's a lot that goes on in that episode, but one of the things that is just ubiquitous is this guy is sitting in his like tiny cubicle apartment, and every surface is a screen, and he's sitting there.
And every time he does something, it costs money.
Yeah, that's that one. But this specifically, like every screen was tuned to like a scenic vista of some Himalayan mountain or something. It looked like he was laying in his bed in a glade.
His bill ran out.
No, and then like this ad came up on every screen, super loud and jarring for hardcore pornography. And then like a little pop-up window was in the corner. It's like, skip this ad for this many credits, and like he had to pay to not have his serenity interrupted by hardcore porn.
Yeah, yuck.
Well, that's what we're doing though. We're going down that slippery slope into this like, hey, we know what you want, but we're gonna like bombard you with advertisements unless you give us the money to get rid of those. Like, and it's creeping into more and more of our lives. Like you pay for YouTube Premium to get rid of the ads.
Yeah, I get it, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. The way I see it from an economic point of view is, before, let's say, the record companies were getting, I don't know, 1% of my attention in a year for that they were able to monetize. They were getting advertisers pay the radio stations to run ads, and they knew I was listening to that radio station, and therefore they were getting that money by having that little bit of my attention in a year. I feel like that number has gone down.
The amount of attention
for the same
the amount of attention that you spend on advertising because you were able to get rid of it.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're getting less of your attention, but they're getting more of your money.
But I feel like the economic trade-off is worth it. Like if I spent 2 hours in a month listening to ads while I was listening to music, and I'm paying $11 a month, that's $6 an hour that I'm paying to not listen to those ads.
Well, like I said before, I listened to that one ad about panty liners so many times that by the fourth day, Ben, it came on, and I was doing something with my hands working on the shower, and I started singing along with it, and almost... When I realized, I flew into a blind rage and almost bought Spotify Premium on the spot.
Yeah, then the mission accomplished for them. But for you, it was like the 10,000 credits episode where your serenity was disturbed, and now you had to pay credits to not have your serenity disturbed.
I'm just... So I understand all of the economics of what is happening in our world today, but there is a part of me that is rebelling against this idea that I don't own anything. That I'm just paying for services. Like software is no longer something you own, it's a service. Music is no longer something you own, it's a service. Like everything is going down this pathway to where I'm going to rent my whole life, and I'm going to have to pay a little bit extra to make sure that my life isn't completely swamped with ridiculous advertising that I don't want to deal with.
I don't know why you insist upon the illusion that you owned anything before this happened.
This is an excellent example of why we should not be in the same room when we record the podcast, because I want to slap you again. I can own things, Ben. People can own things. That is like the foundation of, that's like rule 3 for civilization. Rule number 1 is wait in line. Rule number 2 is only kill when it's absolutely necessary. And rule 3 is if you own this thing, nobody can take it away from you.
Okay. This is going to make a great infographic. I can't wait to make this. I'm already started on it. Josh's rules for civilization.
You're welcome, everyone.
All right, it's time for Bad at Parenting. I think you had one for us this week, Josh.
I was all kinds of bad at parenting. First of all, my kids were exposed to COVID. Oh, for the record, neither of my kids have COVID. They're back in school. Everything's fine. It's fine. It was just the whole notification quarantine process that was totally screwed up, but they're fine. But then, the other night, okay, so we're starting to slowly introduce chores into the lives of my children, okay? And so there's 2 chores that they currently do. One is that they fold and put away their own laundry. and they have their own laundry hampers, so they get their own loads of laundry. Like, we do the laundry. We just take it out of the dryer, and it's only one of their clothes. Like, this is Carter's load of laundry. Like, hey, these are your clothes, fold them and put them away. The other chore that we gave them was the dishes after dinner every night. And initially, it was both of them. You both work together. These are the things that you need to get done. Do it. And they're little kids, so it's subpar. But it's not subpar enough that makes me want to go take over again. This is like the whole reason you have kids, is to get rid of these chores out of your life, right?
Is it?
I mean, you have 6 of them. I assume that after 2, you had more because you realize how much more work you can get done.
Okay, I want to hit pause on your story right now and tell an anecdote real quick.
Okay, go for it.
So this is one I think I've heard over the pulpit in church, but it's not particularly religious. It's just about life. So there was a man, I'm going to forget all the details of it, but his neighbor noticed them farming and noticed that his sons were doing a lot of the work and doing it in an effective way. And he came over and said to him, hey, you're not doing that the right way. That's not good for the cows. And the first man turned to the second man and said, that'd be great, but I'm not raising cows. I'm raising boys.
I mean, yes, that's valid.
And that's the way I look at this stuff. Yeah, I guess I'm trying to get them to do the work, but if I wanted the toilet to be the cleanest it possibly could be, I'd do it myself. But I'm not raising toilets, I'm raising children.
Well, let's be clear. I will get my children to the standard that I want them to be performing the tasks at.
You're going to get both.
I'm going to get both, but
You're
right
raising
now,
children and clean toilets.
I'm raising children, and there's no reason I can't have clean toilets.
Okay.
But they're young, right? And this is one of their first chores they've ever had, so I'm accepting a slightly lower level of doneness, okay? So here's the problem is the two of them working together, like they never got into their heads that many hands make light work. And they just bickered with each other the whole time.
Yeah, you're right. They don't get it into their heads. Be like, if we just calm down, overcome our differences, and cooperate, this gets done a lot faster.
Yeah, but no, they just want to fight over who is perceived to have the easiest task. And I don't know how many times I had to say, listen, you two are fighting. All the work that needs to get done is going to get done. And you're both going to be in here working until it's all done. So stop fighting.
Every parent gives that lecture at some point in time, Josh.
Yeah.
Every parent.
Right. Well, this is the first time that I've given it. There was a final.
If you quit fooling around, you'd be done already. My mom must have said, I remember. That was...
Well, all right, here's the thing. Here's what happened. We got fed up with it. It was every night for like a week straight. And we're like, screw it. You know what? You're doing it by yourself. We're going to alternate nights, and that's it. And you're stuck doing it all by yourself. And so my son does, he's okay. He's like, all right, that's fine. And he does a good enough job when he does the dishes. My daughter does a good enough job when she does the dishes, but it takes her 3 times longer than my son does because she's younger and she can't reach things. And and she's messing around the whole time, which I don't care. Like, she does this, it's taking forever. I'm like, you're the one doing it. Do it faster. No, I don't care. But the other night, Ben, we were done with dinner.
You just made primal sounds that are similar to what a bowl makes when you wave a red cloth in front of it.
We're done with dinner, and we're finishing up, and I say, okay, whose turn is it? And then, of course, it's always the opposite kid that says whose turn it is. So my son goes, oh, it's Jane's turn. I go, okay, Jane, do the dishes. And then she got snarky with me and goes, why don't you do the dishes?
What?
And I'll tell you what, Ben.
A 6-year-old?
A 6-year-old telling me, why don't you do the dishes? And not in a way like she's telling me to do it and walking out of the room. But she's asking me a legitimate question. Why don't I do the dishes? And Ben,
okay, there's infinity things you could say in this moment.
Yeah, and I got so...
I believe in you, Josh. I want to hear that you said the right one.
I got so triggered. And I'm like, I looked at her, and there was so much anger trying to funnel its way out of my system so quickly.
This made you angry?
Yes, it made me stupid angry because she has... And this is what I think I started with, girl, she
doesn't understand that you work for a living so that she has a house and food.
That's where I started. Girl, you have no concept of the amount of effort that I have put into sustaining your existence. You're welcome for your shelter, for your electricity, your water, your food, your sustenance. Your very life is dependent on the work that I do every day. And you're telling me...
all I ask you to do is fold your underwear and do these dishes.
It's like, we prepared this meal that you just ate for you every time without complaint. We do all of these things for you and you can't do the freaking dishes? And like, that was the start of it. But I must have lectured her with everything that came into my head for the next half an hour. Like,
wow.
Over there, just like doing her dishes. And I'm just sitting at the table fuming about the audacity of this 6-year-old child challenging me on how the universe works. She did not cry. She's a 6-year-old girl. So I'm sure every time she wasn't looking at me, she was rolling her eyes and completely blowing me off.
Okay. So I have a personal ethic I live by, and that is no matter how much stuff is running through my mind that I want to say to the child, I know I can quickly exceed their ability to receive it. So I try to make my lectures be as potent as possible by minimizing the length of them. I never exceed 5 minutes. If I exceed 1.
Okay. So that is a very good rule to have if you are trying to impart information or wisdom or behavior into a child. That wasn't what you were doing. That was not what I was doing. This was 2 things. One, it was like trying to make her regret challenging me on something like this. Like, I don't care if she got anything out of it. I just want her to remember, like, oh, I'm not going to do that again. Perfect. Mission accomplished. And number 2, this is one of those situations where I just want her to understand and recognize that as far as she's freaking concerned, her mother and I are the moon and the sun. We're so incomprehensible in our vastness and our wisdom. Like, you have such a narrow view of the universe. Like, you just need to shut up and do what we tell you to do.
I get that, but then at some point, you know how we've talked on this podcast about my unified parenting theory and about how I'm trying to get them to transition from level 1, which is say yes, daddy, and do it, to level 2, which is what else can I do to help? And obviously, she's still at level 1, and you're just trying to get her to level 1.
She's still
say yes, daddy, and do it.
Transitioning from level 0 to level 1. Yep, that's what we're doing.
Yes, which is fine. In all of these kinds of things, this is what I say to them. And my children and I have had a little bit of friction over the years when they ask a form of the same question that she was asking you. Why don't you do it? You're capable. You're sitting there. You can do it faster than me. If you want the dishes done, why don't you do it? I don't care if the dishes get done.
Child, because I've done the dishes since I was 8 years old. And that's what I had you for, is to do these dishes because I'm sick of it.
What you just said is a form of the hazing ethic.
When it comes to chores are a haze, Ben. Like, and I'm 100%
Life
okay
is
with
chores, Highness.
There are, like, I get it. Like, we're not supposed to, like, accept hazing in our world view, but Ben, like, this is just something that has to exist. Like, I'm not gonna not give my kids chores just because, oh, chores are a haze and I shouldn't haze my kids.
No, I'm not saying that. I am saying my reason for giving chores isn't hazing. It's that I'm raising children to be good adults. Now, just today, I had a beautiful experience with my 18-year-old daughter who's been working a minimum wage job in a cafe for the last 3 months. And she says, you know what, Dad, I got to work and I was like, I felt like I'm not getting paid enough to put up with this. And like, I work for an hour and that's not even enough to buy something off the menu in my restaurant. But she said, I am better than all of the other minimum wage workers just because I work hard. And you taught me to do that.
Oh, well, that's nice. But you're still, I mean...
But the friction moments were like when I would send a child to do a chore and they would say some version of what your daughter said to you. Why don't you do the dishes? Sometimes, and I remember my kids specifically saying they would come to me with the problem and they would ask me to skip all the way to the end and solve the problem for them. And I would say a form of, I have identified this as a learning experience for you, child. The phrases I usually use are something like, well, that sounds like a really interesting thing for you to try to figure out. Or, that sounds like a kid problem.
Nice. Yeah.
Which is...
yeah, like you're saying. Like, that's the whole lesson imparting and trying to make them better people and all that. I mean, yay. congratulations.
No, this was your bad at parenting moment. You ranted at your daughter for a half hour because you were ticked off that a 6-year-old doesn't want to do the dishes.
Like, just the audacity. That's what got me. That, like, really, seriously?
You assign too mature of a perspective to her.
I do, because she knows what she's doing. Jane Fleshman, listening from the future, you know what you did.
That's awesome. That is a good place to move on. So it's time for Bad at Logic. Because it's an odd week, it's your turn, and we'll do a bias. Man, so I'm opening up my critical thinking cards here.
I'm just doing all of the talking today. This one is perfect for this week because you exhibited this in a conversation, almost an argument that we had via text message earlier this week.
One thing I like that you and I are good about on this podcast is that we are willing to admit that these biases exist in our life. So which one did I exhibit this week, Josh?
This is Ben front-loading the fact that it's like, yes, we had an argument, but I am the better person now because I admitted blah, blah, blah. We'll get there. So the bias is anchoring. And This is something that I had heard about before in college and experienced in many different ways. It is the first thing you judge influences your judgment of all that follows. And specifically, I have experienced this when it comes to economics. And I find everybody has the same experience when it comes to the prices of things. For example,
yes,
the first time you ever go out to buy a specific type of thing, a specific category of thing, that will anchor itself in your brain as this is how much this genre of things costs.
Right. Like how much you pay for a streaming music service.
Or in my example, the first time I priced a flat screen LED TV, that is just what LED TVs cost now. Like in my mind, the first big fancy TV I bought was $2,000. It was a 65-inch. No, it wasn't even. It was a 55-inch Samsung LED 120 hertz. And I thought it was...
So if you go see another one and it's cost more than that, you say that's expensive, and if you cost less than that, you say it's a good deal.
I'm constantly walking through Walmart, and they have the 75-inch Vizios, 240 hertz with way more bells and whistles for $600. I'm like, holy crap, that's a smoking deal. I can't believe they can make these so cheap. But really, that is what the price is, and I'm just associating it
anchoring off of something from a long time ago.
The first TV I bought. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so what did I anchor on this week?
So you, sir, we had an argument about cell phones because I am kicking around the idea when my phone eventually dies, I will buy a new phone, and I'm kicking around the idea of buying that new fancy folding phone that Samsung makes, the big one, not the stupid one that folds in half, but the one that opens up like a book and turns into basically like a small tablet in your hands. Because I've mentioned on the podcast before, like the number one thing I do on my phone is watch YouTube videos. And there's no reason I shouldn't have the biggest screen available to watch YouTube videos. I'm a big guy. I've got big cargo pockets. I'm never going to be out of pocket space. I'll have the biggest phone and I'll be fine with it. But anyway.
I like how you just declared in one phrase that you're immune to any fashion trends that do or will exist.
I have never been unable to fit something into my pockets. People, like my wife's concerned, like, oh, I can't fit this phone into my pockets because apparently female attire has a severe lack of pockets. Like, fashion industry, wake up. Women love pockets. Just put pockets on things.
Yeah, I don't know. When I lived in Italy, the men were very slavish to the trends of fashion. And if the skinny jeans were the thing and you couldn't fit your phone in it, they'd be like, well, I guess I can't carry my phone now.
So, Ben, as a tangent, I recently, my wife recently ordered the wrong set of socks for me. I told her I need new socks, new white socks that I wear with my tennis shoes. And she's like, on it. And she bought me, one of those jumbo packs that you get as a man. It's like 80 pairs of socks or whatever. It comes in.
Nice.
But they were the wrong ones. They're not the super invisible ones where they go really low. They're like ankle high. So they have like the elastic part that comes up over my ankle bone.
Is that good or bad?
It's bad. Like it's
like I wear those.
Well, but here's the thing, Ben. Like I just got the bag and she's like, oh no, these are the wrong ones. We got to send them back. I'm like, I don't care. Like who cares? Like they're socks.
It's bad, but it's not as bad as sending them back.
Yeah, it's like why? Like these are socks. They're perfectly functional. Why do I care?
Wear these every day for the next 5 years, but it's okay.
Multiple people have seen me wear them. Like, what? Those socks are gross. I'm like, I don't care. They're socks. Like, why are you looking at my socks?
So is the point that you're making that you don't care if cargo shorts go out of style? You're still going to wear them.
I don't care.
Carry your giant freaking screen so you can watch YouTube videos.
I don't care if cargo pockets ever go out of fashion. I'm going to wear them forever because you know what? They're the most useful thing in my life. I like having giant pockets on me all the time.
Me too, man. I think before we started recording, you were talking about how you went from this perfect, highly stocked, everything in double diaper bag to just throwing a spare in your cargo pocket and heading out the door.
Yes, you can fit anything in cargo pockets. Cargo pockets have been the past, but they will continue to be the future.
Yeah, it always blows my mind how women are like, "Oh, that's good, but you're a man, you could get away with it." Wear what you want.
Anyway, coming back to what we were talking about originally,
I will not be sucked into that trap.
I was talking to you about purchasing this big expensive phone, and you're like, "Oh, that's so expensive," and I said, "Oh, well, I'll just get on their 2-year payment plan and pay an extra $35 a month or whatever." And then you, sir, like you went on the attack. You're like, "You are super overpaying for this phone, and they're gonna trap you into this whole thing." And I felt like I immediately on the defensive, like, whoa. Way too confrontational about the pay-as-you-go phone plan. And as we were discussing it, you even told me at one point, like, I think I'm paying way too much for my phone plan. And then you told me that you have 4 smartphones on an unlimited data plan?
6.
You have 6 smartphones on an unlimited data plan. I'm not going to say the price, but you told me the price, and I was shocked at how little you were paying for that plan compared to my 2 smartphones on a limited data plan.
I think I'd have been able to get over it sooner if you'd have called it a logical fallacy, a bias. Like, you're suffering for anchoring here. Let's look at the difference.
I think that's when you finally did tell me the price of your plan. That's exactly what I told you. Like, dude, you are totally anchoring here from your time selling cell phones in the 90s because you were...
All right. Well, if we ever start arguing about the price of flat screen TVs and you're telling me how good of a deal we're getting, I'll know why.
Yeah, that's the good thing for me is like if you anchor way too high, then everything's a smoking deal.
Well, speaking of smoking deals, bad at English this week. I'll make it a quick one. The phrase is utterly redders.
Utterly redders.
Utterly redders. Now, this came up when I was deployed to the Middle East with the British, and one of my friends described what the weather was like outside. And he said, "Gosh, Ben, it's utterly redders outside today." And I'm like, "Utterly redders?" And I got out my notebook and wrote it down. I'm like, "What does that mean?" He says, "It means very hot."
Well, just say now, very hot, you psycho.
Utterly redders. So when I tried to look this up, Josh, I don't know if this has ever happened to you. I Googled it. There were 2 results. I came up with a Google search that returns 2 results. And when I add this to the Bad at Magic glossary on badatmagic.live, we will have achieved the 3rd search result for this term on the internet.
Oh, that's actually outstanding. I'm a big fan of being one of 3 things on the internet for a random phrase that your friend probably made up to screw with you.
Okay, well, here's the thing. If you take off the word utterly, which is just used as a modifier because they would never say very redders, that doesn't make sense. It's utterly redders. If you just look for redders, it comes up, but it comes up as a military slang term. For the British military. I found it on a British military website that's talking about it being a slang term, and it says, let's see, redders. Word meaning hot or warm. For example, I'm redders today. I need to cool down.
Where did it come from? What is the etymology of this?
I couldn't find it.
There is no source. Like this phrase, just somebody said it, and then somebody else in the room went, "I like that. I'm going to say it."
If the etymology is out there, it does exist. There are some word sites where people take this as a challenge to look this kind of thing up. I intend to submit it, but for now, I'll put it on our glossary and will be the 3rd search result. If you search for utterly redders in quotes on Google, instead of 2 results, you'll get 3.
So I feel like I live in the prime environment to be able to say utterly redders all the time because I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's stupid hot. And honestly, that's the way I describe it. Hey, how is the weather? Oh, it's stupid hot.
I've been to Phoenix, Arizona in the summer, and I've been to Qatar 3 times. Phoenix doesn't even compare. I don't know why human beings live in Qatar.
Because we can, Ben. because
it isn't just 130 degrees outside. It's also humid because it's right next to the ocean. It's utterly redders. It's the only way to describe it.
Oh, it's not stupid hot. It's utterly redders.
Yes.
I'll keep that in mind.
Okay. So I need to do a quick board game survivor. We didn't do a lot, but our family tried a game this week called the 5-second rule. This is one of those where you can fit the rules on a post-it note. Super good. 5-second rule. The way it works is you have a deck of cards that are like Trivial Pursuit cards, and on it will just have a category, and then you have a little timer that only lasts 5 seconds, and you read the question, and then you turn the time over, and they have 5 seconds to answer it.
That is not at all what I thought the 5-second rule was going to be.
Yes. So it follows a very simple formula, and it is name 3 things that.
Oh, okay.
So name 3 things that, and then you say whatever the category is. You flip over the timer, and they got 5 seconds to do it. Like, name 3 movies starring Kevin Bacon. Flip the timer.
I can't do that because I'm not 80. Like, Kevin Bacon is not in my zeitgeist other than 6 Degrees to Kevin Bacon.
Okay, and there's some other rules and stuff and go with it. And this game kind of has the Pictionary rule going on. That is, if people aren't trying and it's not interesting. But our family had a good time with it, so we're keeping this.
Or if you ask the parents, name 3 movies with Kevin Bacon, and they nail it, and then you look at one of the kids and say, name 3 movies with Kevin Bacon, and they just stare back at you like, who's Kevin Bacon?
I deliberately said the name Kevin Bacon because of his notoriety. I think kids know.
I don't think kids know Kevin Bacon beyond the 6 Degrees to Kevin Bacon thing.
Yeah, that's enough.
But you can't name... All right, forget it. We're just going to let that one go.
It's time for our feature, Josh.
Yes. I've been looking forward to this for 4 weeks now.
Me too. So we teased our audience. Maybe if you read along, we are going to be reviewing the book World War Z by
Max Brooks.
What is it? Max Brooks. Okay. So he describes it as a collection of individual accounts narrated by an agent of the United Nations Post-War Commission following the devastating global conflict against the zombie plague.
And that's just the perfect synopsis of this book.
Yes. So basically, synoptically, it's in the near present. I don't know. What would you say technologically? It was kind of now.
It was absolutely like present day, almost like a little bit behind where we are now because it was written in the early 2000s. But yeah.
Yeah, it was written in 2008. So present day-ish. It's 20 years after the zombie plague started and 10 years after the conflict was over. They're like, we need to go back and do a history and talk to the people that survived it and hear their stories and record them.
Right, and like the opening chapter is a discussion. It was interesting the way that he phrased it, is that as if the narrator had created a full UN report. Like his job was to go out and categorize like the factual events that occurred in timeline order across the planet of this zombie apocalypse that happened. But then he had all of these personal narratives and these personal interviews that he had that didn't really tie in, that weren't really impactful to
they weren't scientific data, they were just people's experiences.
Yes, and like the first chapter is him describing that these are all super important and we need to capture these too, but they had no place in the official UN report.
Yeah, they were arguing with him about him, saying they weren't valid records for preservation.
Right. And so that then being the book World War Z is this collection of just the personal stories, which from a storytelling narrative is so rich because it just gives you this idea that, oh, all of this official stuff has happened and all of these things exist in this universe that I have created, but we're not dealing with those. We're going to deal with this little sliver of it right over here.
Yeah, and I enjoyed this immensely. It felt so unique from a storytelling narrative point of view. The one thing, and I thought it was a liability, and I changed my mind halfway through the book and decided it was an asset, was that in a traditional storytelling narrative, you begin from the beginning of the story and you don't know the outcome. So the tension is created by the writer in that you don't know what's going to happen. But in this, from the very beginning, you know anyone you're going to talk to survived the zombie apocalypse. So the outcome is already certain.
And I was like, oh, well, there's no tension. There's not going to be any tension. There's no drama because everybody made it that we're talking to.
Yeah, you say that, but then you're getting into... so a lot of these, if people haven't read the book, basically it is... Imagine Max Brooks was a genius in that he imagined what a zombie apocalypse would look like. And not just like what you see in the movies, like, oh, there was a bunch of zombies and we fought them and we won. Like, he thought through the logistics of it. He thought through the geopolitics of it, how it would happen, how it would spread, what the responses would be, how we as a society would react to it in different cultures. And like it's so well done because it's so all-encompassing and so varied and different from the different perspectives. And
yeah, go ahead.
So the whole book is written in these series of vignettes from a myriad of different people that experience different chunks of this zombie apocalypse. And it's so cool. And like Ben was talking about, like, how could there be any tension? Well, you say that, like, academically at the beginning of this chapter that the person that he is interviewing survived the zombie apocalypse. But they get into the story that he's telling from that character's perspective, and there's tension. Like, how is this happening? How can this person even have lived through this?
Yeah. So the accounts take place all over the world. He interviews people from China, the U.S., Greece, Brazil, Barbados, Israel, Finland, Antarctica, and even outer space. And every one of those contexts has a slightly different perspective on what was happening. The culture they come from, the background, the geography, the politics, all those things influence this. And he didn't shy away from any of that, which blew my mind. So this is a really weird sequel. This is a follow-up to his fictitious survival manual that came out 5 years before this called The Zombie Survival Guide.
I know. I was a big fan of that book, too. I gave that out as gifts to several people.
Yeah. I received this as a gift from you. I never read it. I wish I had now because it would have come in handy when I read this. That was inspired. And then this book, he was like, all right, I already wrote this book about like telling people how to survive the zombie apocalypse. And it was written in the first person, like, all right, the zombie apocalypse is going on. Here's what you need to do to survive. Very much like Zombieland, if you ever saw that movie, where there was like rules to follow to live through the zombie apocalypse.
Well, there's rules.
Cardio.
There's rules to follow to get through our current life and society. He just decided to write it down from a different perspective in a different set of circumstances.
Now, there was a book that came out in 1984 called The Good War, An Oral History of World War II. And it was very similar to this in structure, in that they were interviewing a bunch of people that had lived through the war, and they were reflecting on their experience and telling what happened. So it kind of followed that format. And then the zombie apocalypse he followed was very similar to, in the zombie universe, they're very similar to the zombies from the Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead movies by George A. Romero.
You're talking about, this is the classic old school zombies where they're very slow, shuffling, undead creatures that can only be killed by destruction of the head, and that's about it.
Yes, reanimated, cannibalistic humans.
Yes.
Okay. So in the book, World War Z, he refers to his previous book as the Civilian Survival Guide. So you can find that throughout the text. He's referring to his previous book. And it's in 5 parts: warnings, blame, the great panic, turning the tide, and goodbyes. So, sequentially, but all of it's in the form of reflections.
And it's just like any other global conflict. He talks about it from the beginning. And the first chapter, the first person he talks to is a Chinese doctor who theoretically saw and diagnosed and dealt with patient 0.
Yeah. Which is where these things naturally go. If this is some type of medical issue, let's try to solve it by going back to patient 0, finding out where it came from, see if we can figure out how to solve it. I thought this was going to develop into something over the course of the book. And as far as I know, unless I missed something, it never really did.
Patient 0? No, they never talked about patient 0 again ever.
Right.
Like they
didn't develop a vaccine. They didn't figure out what was causing it. They didn't cure people. That wasn't what this was about.
One of the things that he did in the book that I thought was interesting is that he didn't try to explain the zombie phenomenon. Like there was,
I know. I was waiting for it, and it never happened.
Multiple points of the books, he actually has his characters that he's interviewing bring up the concept. Like there's one chapter where they're talking to a deep sea diver, and they are in a submarine, and they are radio tagging a swarm of zombies on the bottom of the ocean that are wandering around the Atlantic. And the guy wonders out loud, how are these things alive? The pressure would kill anything at this depth, and they're just wandering around down here.
Okay, so I want to talk about this for a second in the context of the other things that exist in the zombie world. So I made a list. You talked about before, and I think it was brilliant on your part, the pathos of zombies in fiction. And that is, we take what were formerly humans, we do something fundamental to them now where you can kill them for free. Like, it's not murder. You don't have to live with that on your conscience. You can now kill for free. The mythos of it is and I think it's appropriate that we contextualize this in the way that we review things on the Bad at Magic podcast, and that is we review it as a magic system. So I want to look at the rules of the zombies in World War Z as the magic system of this book.
Okay.
So, there's the constants of the zombie mythos. They eat human flesh. They don't feel pain. They live through things that would kill ordinary humans. They aren't afraid. They don't really talk to each other. They can't and don't speak.
No intelligence. They are 100% reactive, like stimulus response type beings.
Yes. Those 5 things I just listed tend to be pretty constant across all different kinds of zombies in all fiction.
Yes. Very true.
Those are the constants. Then there's the variable things that vary based on what you're talking about. Strength and speed. Some zombies are kind of weak and crumbly and slow, and some are really fast and really strong.
Right. So, I mean,
I'm looking at you 28 days later, and what was the Will Smith one? I am Legend.
Yes. Those were vampires, but that's different.
Okay. Then there's their focus and patience. Some zombies are just like squirrel and they're off on whatever's next, and some will like wait outside your door for a month.
Nothing better to do. They got nothing but time on their hands.
Things that also vary is the cause. Sometimes in various zombie properties, there's like mind control, viruses, aliens, undead for whatever reason. In this case, it was medical. So I think in the George A. Romero books, there was like an asteroid going through space that was causing zombies to come up out of the grave. I don't remember what it was.
This one was medical. Let's get that on the table. This was a standard zombie virus.
So if the constants are that they eat flesh, don't feel pain, live through things that kill ordinary humans, aren't afraid, they recognize each other. I forgot to name that one. That's a constant. They recognize other zombies. They aren't trying to eat each other.
Yes.
And they can't and don't speak. And then the variable things are their strength and speed, their motivation, their patience, and the cause. So in this book, the rules of this magic system.
The rules of these zombies are, like you said, they do recognize other zombies. They live through things that would kill anything else in multiple ways. They talk about how in the winter they would freeze solid and then thaw out in the spring and then just keep on chomping away.
Right. They could walk around on the bottom of the sea.
We saw one got crushed by thousands of tons of rock in a cave and was totally fine after they dug it out. Things like that.
Explosions don't damage them. Bullets don't hurt them.
As long as they've got muscle tissue to move their bodies, they're just going to keep coming at you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, unkillable in the normal sense. But they are slow zombies. They are shambly. They are no stronger than the host that they took over. There's no special properties that happen to these things. They don't all of a sudden become amazing climbers or some nonsense. They're just shambling like idiots, lemmings almost.
Now, one thing I wasn't clear on is did they die?
Yes. So, for all intents and purposes, the host of the zombie was dead.
So you couldn't cure them and then they were fine. They were dead. If you cured them, that just made them not move anymore.
Their hearts were stopped. Like they did not pump any blood. They were not circulating nutrients to their body anyway. They didn't have to breathe, obviously, because they were underwater. All of their fluids were replaced by some black viscous liquid they kept talking about.
Right, black viscous liquid. So I want to point this out from the pathos point of view. That is that the fact that this condition is irreversible, it just steers us clear of the argument of like, can we cure them? Are they still human? All those kinds of things. It's irreversible. Forget about it.
Yes, which is helpful for the storytelling narrative. And like, we don't even have to explore the whole ethics side of it. It's like a clear black and white scenario. There's us and there's them, and they will stop at nothing to destroy all of us.
But it isn't just us and them. It's also, and this is one thing I can never work out in these kinds of things. Like, how much of you do they consume before they move on and you're now one of them?
That's something that they didn't talk about because people would get swarmed and like bit by the zombie or whatever. Like if the zombies ate you entirely before you turned, then would you just be a skeleton and not a zombie?
Right. So probably the closest real world analog we have to this of a virus that you can contract that makes you like lose your ability to function and do weird things is rabies. And they even acknowledge that in the book because that was the first thing they called it when the outbreak happened.
Yeah, before they had an idea, a real understanding of what was happening, they called it African rabies.
Yes, because the first outbreak happened in South Africa. And that was eerily similar to what was happening politically in the United States when this first started happening, and our leadership were trying to tag it to a particular geography.
Yes, because that's one of the sections of this book. There's the warnings where the first handful of things start happening, but the whole second section is called blame, where like nation states are trying to figure out who's responsible and whose job it is to deal with this.
Now, I don't know about you, but there were some parts of this that were eerily prescient for the fact that this came out in 2008.
Talking about now looking back from a post-COVID society perspective.
Yes, exactly. There was, like, for instance, early on, they thought maybe they could come up with a vaccine to it. And they tried to develop one, and they gave one, and it was ineffectual. And there was a lot of, people that had a lot of political stake in the fact that it should work even though it wasn't, and so they're pretending like it did. And this really seemed kind of, it almost wasn't funny to me because of how close it was to the reaction we had in our country.
They talked about how everybody kind of freaked out at first, and then like cases when first spiked in this country, and then they went down when the winter hit, and everybody kind of relaxed and loosened up, and then it hit them way harder the second time.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
Yeah, a little close to home.
There was some, so there's cynicism surrounding the vaccine. Then there's corporate cynicism, anything for a buck. Like, okay, whatever, zombie apocalypse, that's the next thing we'll make money on. We'll sell them snake oil and tell them it's a cure. Like, who cares if they all die as long as we're making money? This is one where I get off. I don't accept this in my fiction writing. Like, killing your customers is bad business.
Well, and that they talk to one of the vignettes that you're referring to is there's the guy who came up with the vaccine. I'm doing air quotes. Like he just had, he was a businessman that had some R&D guys that rushed through a maybe effective vaccine against rabies.
Yeah, we'll call it dewormer.
Yeah, it was honestly, I compared it in my mind to the anthrax shot that I got in the military before I went overseas. Because
I hate it. I hate those. We've documented anthrax shots on this podcast.
Yes. The problem is we get vaccinated against the anthrax that you would get from being around farm animals all the time. Like the immunization we receive will do nothing against weaponized anthrax. Like the actual chemical compound that you are, or biological compound, whatever it is, that you're going to be attacked with from the Russian storehouses, that is not the anthrax that we're being vaccinated against. They just have the same name. So essentially, this guy did the same thing, and he created this vaccine for rabies that was supposed to fix this whole thing, but it wasn't rabies. It was a whole different thing, but it didn't matter. He was selling peace of mind.
He was getting really rich off of it.
And that was his whole thing, is like, I was just selling it. We didn't make any claims that we weren't supposed to. I was technically correct the entire time. However, they also noted that he was living in a compound in Antarctica, and he couldn't leave because he was wanted in every country on the planet.
Right. Yeah. He wasn't safe anywhere. Okay, so there was corporate cynicism. Then there was political cynicism. Like, okay, just whatever the next crisis is, I'll capitalize on that to get and maintain power.
Yes, they talk specifically a couple things that happened in some of the countries. In Russia, for example, he proposed that during the zombie apocalypse, as all this happened, it transitioned back into a holy empire or a religious-based fundamental society.
Yeah. Weird.
Because of just some of the circumstances that occurred during their fight with the zombie outbreak. And their leader at the time, he talked about they had no real resistance or no cure or anything that you're talking about. So as the military is going out fighting these hordes of zombies, if they got bit, they knew they were going to turn, so they had to deal with it. And so they would commit suicide. And they talked about how they started grouping up, and like every day, whoever got bit would like group together with like a handful of people, and they'd all off themselves together. And then one chaplain took it upon himself. It's like, you know what? No more original sin, no more suicides. I'll take care of it. And he started capping all the people that got shot.
Right, so he was like the Punisher.
Yeah, well, no, he was
the chaplain Punisher.
He's like delivering divine justice, or
I'll save you
salvation
from the sin of suicide by murdering you.
Exactly. And the chaplain corps, like in the Russian military, picked it up, and then the guy that was running for election or for office in Russia, like, declared himself head of that church or whatever out of almost nowhere, and claimed all of this religious authority, and the chaplains just didn't say no, and then they became a fundamental religious society again.
Yeah, there was also a thing going on with those where they would they determined that there were so many people that are getting turned into zombies and becoming part of the zombies that they just had too many people. So they decided they were going to decimate their force, which in the ancient Roman meaning means kill 10% of the force, and that they would use their own force to conduct the murders. They didn't have like kill squads. They just made everyone turn on 1 in 10 guys and kill them, so that then they became part of the people that were doing these horrible things, and now everyone has their hands dirty and they're committed, and then we can rule them with an iron fist.
Yeah, Max Brooks really leaned into the Russia bad mentality. You can tell he grew up in a Cold War mentality.
Yeah, Cold War era. Yeah. So and then there were spies, and then there were refugees, and then people were exploiting the desperation of the refugees for profit and power, as if this wasn't going to become all-encompassing. That's the thing that kept impressing on me, and I think it's similar to the response we've seen to COVID-19. It's that everyone thinks that this is just a temporary distraction. Everything's going to go back to the way it was before, and so I should just try to capitalize on never let a good crisis go to waste.
That's a kind of a cynical way of looking at it, but I think there's always going to be a segment of the world that's looking out for opportunities like that. Whether or not they think or what they think is going to happen, people are always going to be trying to do this. Like, even if these corporations knew how bad COVID was, there's no reason not to try to capitalize, because it's still, the world still spins. Like, yes, this is the end of in this book, it's the end of the world, but there still has to be an economy, there still has to be trade, there still has to be things going on.
So
right up
the
until
the technology that's been used to develop the COVID-19 vaccine was cutting edge when it came out. And I guess if you were to look at it really cynically, you could say we don't know if it works or not or how effectual it is, but there is pretty good scientific, factual, data-based reasons to look at it as a miracle of modern science. And I've listened to firsthand accounts from the scientists that had just done the right work right up to the point that when this came out, they were perfectly positioned to be able to help develop this and then produce and distribute this vaccine in record time compared to anything else in the history of mankind. And those people are everything you want in that type of situation. They're curious, they're scientific, they just want to help. And yeah, they're making money off it, but it's their knowledge and expertise that's helping all of us.
Okay. We're getting far afield of our World War Z book, but
well, we were talking. So Max Brooks' depiction of this kind of thing was very much not like that. It was very cynical. It was just, it didn't matter if it worked or not. I was making a quick buck.
Well, and this is something that it's a transition that happens in the book as he's talking to specifically the American interviewees that he's talking to, because at the beginning it is a lot of that, a lot of very self-centered. There's the guy that created the false vaccine that's now wanted. There was the bodyguard for the rich and the famous that tried to build their own secure compound and broadcast their existence in this fortress like it was a reality TV show on the internet. It was a lot.
Yeah, until their defenses failed.
And not from the zombies, but from people trying to get in so they could also be safe in this fortress. But that's at the beginning of the book, is this very self-centered idea. And then as the transition happens, as we get later into the story, everything revolves around how basically all of humanity came together to fight this plague. From the scale of nation states, where they had, in the middle of this complete breakdown of a global economy, they somehow gathered enough people to have a decent United Nations meeting in Hawaii to discuss what the follow-up actions were going to be, all the way down to a guy from New York talking about how he joined the local, he had to fight to join the local militia that just walked around at night to make sure the neighborhood was safe. Everybody coming together and doing their part and pulling their weight in a way that had previously been completely alien to our culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the U.S. relocated their capital to Hawaii.
Which is, I mean, again, this is a genius stroke of Max Brooks, because why would you even think that? Like, oh, because it's an island and it's going to be difficult for zombies to get there.
So at one point, they admit that the vaccine that they come up with was ineffective, but they continued using it as a placebo. And this is an interesting thing. It's that if everyone in society is panicking because there's something happening that's beyond everyone's control, we can at least control the panic by making them think there's something they can do.
This was also a theme that they talked about in the early portions of the book, where there was some portions of the government that realized that this was going to be as big as it was, and they had this all-encompassing plan, like, these are the things that we have to do to curb this. And the administration was just unwilling to take the hugely drastic steps in order to implement them. And so they had to have some way of controlling not necessarily the virus outbreaks, but the outbreaks of the panic. There's a whole section of the book called The Great Panic for a reason. That was when people realized this couldn't be stopped, and it started overwhelming whole cities at a time. And all of civilization came to a screeching halt when people packed up and just left. Like, en masse, whole countries got up and just started trying to run away from the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah. So I was impressed by how much he borrowed from historical things for how he contextualized the cultural differences of the way people were experiencing this. For instance, the Israelis have some interesting policies that they've got from their past experiences, which is why in the book they were the first ones to basically turtle up and lock their country down, and so they were able to control the spread of the virus pretty early on. Yeah. And specifically, he mentions the Yom Kippur War, which was an interesting historical incident where, like, the Egyptians would do a quote-unquote military exercise where they would mobilize their entire army, march right up to the Israel border, and then go back home. And they did that like 8 times until the Israelis kind of relaxed and goes, oh, it's just another Egyptian military exercise. Until one time, they march up to the border, and they just kept going.
Yes, and he mentioned that specifically. Like, they almost pushed us off into the ocean. It was cut, touch and go for a second.
So the idea then is that they learned their lesson never to take something that looks dangerous at not seriously.
Yes. And so, yeah, that whole chapter was so fascinating at the beginning. Just talking about how, one, because of Israeli intelligence policies, there was a handful of people that were they were almost forced to take it seriously and run it to ground to see if this is really a thing that is happening.
Yeah. So when people start saying the word zombies instead of saying, that's just fiction and silliness, they're like, well, what if there actually are zombies?
Yeah. And so they had a guy who started traveling the world and running down sources to figure out if this was really a thing that was happening. Turns out it was. And he broke that to the nation on TV or whatever. And, like, nobody cared. And they even said, like, the Israelis sent a version of their report to the U.S. government, like, months before it broke publicly. And they found it in a desk of some Houston bureaucrat's office or some nonsense. Like, it was just something that was taken so nonsensically that it was given zero weight as being real.
Yeah. And this always happens. I just finished watching the Netflix documentary about September 11th. You can do this ad nauseum with September 11th.
There are so many potential threats that exist. Like, which ones do you take seriously? Like,
there's hindsight bias.
Yes, you have finite resources to actually analyze all of the threats that you're getting. Which one of these is some 14-year-old kid goofing around, and which one is the one little tip that actually leads to 9/11?
So in the second part, the blame part of it, that we reach this point where it's the fog of war, you know? No one knows how serious this is, if it's going to get over, who's got it, where does it, and all of the confusion allows it to spread beyond anything. And that felt so familiar.
Yes, because of the momentum that nation states have in responding to crises in this way. Like, the spread of the virus or the spread of the zombie apocalypse happened faster than countries were able to deal with it. And like you're talking about, there's a lot of similarities we can draw with the current pandemic. The difference here being that it's terrible that people are dying, but in the book, people would die and then come back to life and then continue spreading this apocalypse.
So
once it spread to the point of just absolute alarm, and I never it never felt like he established the lifespan of a zombie. Do you feel like you know that as one of the rules of the magic system?
I do. Like they talk about it a little bit as far as how they'll just be around forever is what the thing was. And it's all about the decomposition of the zombie. Like until the zombie can no longer move. And you have to pick that out multiple. Like it took multiple readings before you start to recognize the little hints. Like for example,
maybe he covers that in the book, the Zombie Survival Guide, but it wasn't in this book.
Maybe, but like he talks about some of the zombies were like just like an upper torso or a shoulder and a head, and the head would just keep biting, and like they're just hanging out, and it's just a head. And another part they talk about where the ones up north, like, yeah, they freeze solid in the winter, but they're being preserved. They're going to last longer. They're not decomposing. They're just still here. They talk about it was Greenland or Iceland being one of the most heavily infested areas, and they just could not clean it out to save their lives.
Yeah, it was Iceland.
There's also the underwater ones where, again, the submarine guy talking about, like, salt water is one of the most corrosive things on the planet. Why aren't these things falling apart?
Yeah. So that's part of the magic system, and it's necessary to preserve the conflict. So then we enter the Great Panic, and he doesn't brush lightly over any of these things. He digs deeply into aspects of them. You know, order breaks down around the world. Entire regions are overrun. Pakistan and Iran exchanged nuclear weapons.
Yes, which was such an interesting thing to talk about in the middle of a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, like what are people paying so much? You're like, all right, well, everything's going to crap. We're shooting off our nukes.
Well, and who was it? Like this is bad for me not to know these geopolitics, but it's always Pakistan and India, right? That are talking about.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that specifically. India and Pakistan had so much infrastructure built around the fact that they were going to exchange nuclear weapons, like against it, like they're going to nuke each other. That they had infrastructure and bureaucracy around it. Like there was phone lines, there was people that knew each other on a first name basis on either side to prevent or talk about these kinds of things to prevent it from happening. But Pakistan and Iran had none of that. And all Iran saw was a bunch of zombies coming through Pakistan into Iran. And they decided, well, this is the best way we can stop this, to nuke the strategic locations in Pakistan. And then Pakistan responded in force.
Yeah. Another one I mentioned was the decimation of the Russian military. The Ukrainians used chemical weapons on their own populace, but apparently the Zed heads weren't susceptible to that. Only the not zombified people.
Well, and they did it on purpose, though, and that's what the general was talking about. In that vignette, there was a guy who was on a bridge, and his whole job was to stop the infected civilians, the ones that when they died and they would turn into zombies. He was supposed to screen all of these refugees from coming into the safe zone. But there was no way to separate who was infected and who wasn't. And there was just thousands of people running from the zombie horde trying to get across. And so somebody in the upper echelons made the decision, I'll tell you how we separate the infected ones from the non-infected ones. And they used chemical weapons to wipe out all of the refugees. And then the ones that stood up, those are the infected ones.
Yeah. And then, so that's the Ukrainian way of dealing with it. We got the Iranian way of dealing with it. And then in the U.S., they're like, all right, well, lots of people are getting infected. We need a big win, and we need to show that our military might can handle this. So let's have the Battle of Yonkers.
That was it still is one of my favorite chapters in this book because it resonates with me as a previous military member.
Go for it.
All right, so this idea, like Ben just said, like this zombie thing is happening. The government needs a win. We need something big and flashy that we can put in front of everybody. Listen, we are still fine.
We're handling it.
It's under control. We've got this. And so they brought like all of the military muscle that they had and they set it down. And the guy even said like it was a great choke point. Like there was one bridge, there was one place they had to come through. And we set up everything. They had tanks, they had Abrams, they had
tactical advantage, they had firepower advantage,
they had artillery, the rockets that launched from over the horizon. Like they had freaking everything, air support, the whole 9 yards. And like they had the zombies started coming, and they opened up with the biggest guns first, and the rockets started launching. And then as they got closer, like the helicopters were strafing them, and then the tanks laid into them, and it was like, yeah, it's so awesome. The problem, and they started talking about like the problems. It's like, you ever seen a tank shoot one of the
a
person. Like, yeah, it looks cool, but there's like thousands of people, and your dart that's made for anti-armor only killed like 3 of them.
Yeah.
And eventually, like he's talking about, all of New York was filtering through this choke point, this giant zombie horde of millions of people, and they literally just started running out of ammo.
Because and this it kind of feels like the war in Afghanistan. I mean, we brought all these weapons and stuff, and it just didn't matter. It was like bringing a gun to a knife fight, except
and,
it just.
Well, and he even talked about, like, I don't know if it was that chapter or later in the book, he talks about shock and awe is the whole thing. Like, the idea is that we hit you so hard and so fast that, like, people, like, when you're fighting other people, they will back off. Like, whoa, we don't want any part of this. But that concept doesn't work with zombies. It doesn't matter what you throw at them. They're not afraid of you. They're just going to keep coming. And it ties, and then he tied it back into the concept that the military is constantly struggling with, and that is we're constantly preparing to fight the last war we just fought.
That's exactly what I wanted to go, is that, our military is equipped and prepared to fight against a major world power where it's other human beings on the other side. People who get afraid, people who get cold, people who feel the impact of an explosion and that affects them. But because of our magic system here, none of that mattered. And we ran out of bullets, and our military was completely ineffective. So the result of the Battle of Yonkers in this book was that, we don't know what to do. The government's flashy expansion of ammo was worthless.
It was a complete cluster. They ended up like being completely routed by this horde of zombies. People like running for their lives and jumping on anything with wheels to try to get out of there. Oh, it painted such a great picture for early in the book, like just how dire the situation was.
So here's a quote I found from Max Brooks about where he was, I think, getting interviewed about the book. He says, "I love my country enough to admit that one of our national flaws is isolationism. I wanted to combat that in World War C and maybe give my fellow Americans a window into the political and cultural workings of other nations. Yes, in World War Z, some nations come out as winners and some as losers, but isn't that the case in real life as well? I wanted to base my stories on the historical actions of countries in question, and if it offends some individuals, then maybe they should re-examine their own nation's history."
Oh, yeah. Listen, Russia, we're not saying like that this is how you would handle the zombie apocalypse, but given past indications, this is probably how it would go.
Yeah. So he used this as a platform to criticize and highlight government ineptitude, corporate corruption, and human short-sightedness. And I liked it for that reason. Now, specifically regarding his magic system, the zombies, he says, "Zombies are the scariest because they break all the rules. Werewolves and vampires and mummies and giant sharks, you have to go look for them. My attitude is if you go looking for them, no sympathy. But zombies come to you. Zombies don't act like a predator. They act like a virus, and that virus is at the core of my terror. There's no middle ground, no room for negotiation. They're just like a force of nature, a hurricane, the flu, or an earthquake."
Well, I mean, if Max Brooks is afraid of zombies, I'm sorry for him. Slow, shambling zombies, I'm not super worried about. And like this book even gives us indications. Like once everybody got their stuff together, like got over the fact that this is a real thing, and like the military response at the end of the book to literally take back the country foot by foot was a bunch of dudes with rifles.
Okay, so let's get into turning the tide. So we've gone through warnings, blame, and the Great Panic, and now we're into turning the tide. So talk about the Redeker plan.
The Redeker plan. So in the book, they had this idea, and this guy that came up with it was for South Africa, and he was pitched as this guy who, no emotion, cold robotic guy. You want something done, you ask him, and he's going to give you the no bull answer, and it's going to be outrageous, and it's going to hurt your feelings, and it's going to go against your moral fiber, but it would work. And there was 2 parts of the Redeker plan. One was you need to recognize that you can't protect your country. You need to figure out what your safe zones are going to be, the places that have the most resources, that are easiest to defend, and concentrate your population there. Like just pull back, like lock down the fort, husband your resources, and work on a way to start pushing back later. The second piece of it is the part that is the morally outrageous one, and that is you can't evacuate everybody. So the people you don't evacuate, you leave them
are your decoys.
You leave them specifically there as bait to buy you time in order to defend your safe zones better.
Yeah.
It's like you had to make the conscious, deliberate decision at the strategic level that these potentially tens of thousands of people in this town are going to die for the greater good.
Yeah. So, and like you said, this does push at the borders of our morality. But in a situation like this that the magic system sets up, the limitations are more interesting than its capabilities. We can explore the edges of something we normally don't have to wrestle with. Like, what if, we say we want to help all the weak ones and the poor ones and those, but what if we couldn't? Are we willing to deliberately use them as bait so that the rest can survive?
Yeah, it's not just like we can't help you, sorry. It's we can't help you, and you're actually helping us because we're going to leave you there.
Yeah, and you'll slow down the zombies so that we can get away.
Yeah.
So the U.S. decides those places are Hawaii and the Rocky Mountains, where they can, use the geography and stuff to defend against the zombies.
It was everything west of the Rockies. Like the Rockies were like their Mendoza line, where the zombies had a hard time getting through the cold, high altitude nonsense in the passes and things. Fortified a handful of strategic places, and then the entire West Coast was relatively protected and safe so long as they cleansed it of infection from the inside.
Europe gets completely overrun, except for like the UK. Russians retreat to Siberia. India goes up into the Himalayas. The South Americans go into the Andes. Basically, cold becomes your line, where because zombies aren't doing anything to stay warm and humans are, then that sets you apart.
That was another thing we didn't talk about yet, is that he brought up several times, was because we fell back in technology at some points, like because of the logistic chains and the just-in-time supply chain and the power grid and all that stuff, everybody immediately like almost fell back on fossil fuels for like sustenance and warmth in their houses.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot more like actual fires being burned. A lot of things that shouldn't be burned were burned. And it almost put us into like this weird climate change scenario where you had this artificial, almost nuclear winter, where winters were harsher and lasted longer because of all of the pollutants we were putting in the atmosphere.
Yeah. So Australia retreats to Tasmania, Japan to Kamchatka, which I only knew because that's a place in the game Risk.
There you go.
China refuses to evacuate and is worse hit. Their military revolts and strikes the Politburo with nukes. They finally come around and implement the Radeka plan and then retreat to Manchuria. But there's this one scenario where everyone in North America, I think before they'd established the Rockies dividing line, there was this huge group of refugees that just retreats into Canada.
Yes, everybody just push north. Just get to where it's cold.
So, don't know, just go north because the zombies can't deal with the cold. And it turns into like this party, like, hey, we're all camping out here up in northern Canada, and then the winter starts to hit. They burn up all the trees, they eat up all the food, and then it becomes this massive refugee crisis where people are starving to death. And freezing to death.
And they turn to cannibalism, and like it just went downhill fast.
Yeah, I can totally imagine that. I mean, we have that happening historically. Okay.
Another very interesting fact, while we're talking about the geographic places and what they did, was North Korea. He took a second to have a chapter to discuss what happened in North Korea, and the answer is nobody knows. Like
nobody knows. They all disappeared.
Yeah, they just had their guys at the DMZ like changing shifts like every other day, and then one day replacements didn't show up, and everybody in North Korea disappeared, and nobody knows what happened to them.
But the guy they were interviewing was from South Korea, and he was like, well, we still had to man our post because we didn't know what they were up to, and we've been fighting this war with them for almost 100 years now, and we couldn't leave, and we needed to redirect some of our forces to fight the zombies, but we couldn't because we were still afraid the North Koreans might invade.
Yeah, because that's something North Koreans would do, is this kind of scenario. And he talked about the honeycomb underground fortresses and things, and like, maybe it's possible that they all retreated down there and they're just living the perfect communist dictator lifestyle where he's just telling all of his people, the entire surface world has been overrun by the zombie apocalypse and I am your savior and I'm the only thing that's keeping you all safe. Or the opposite scenario where there's just 23 million zombies roaming around in these underground caverns and we have no idea.
Yeah. And he never answered it. And then to kind of round it out, he ended with a vignette by the French, which I thought interesting. He decided he was going to redeem in his book. So they were eager to regain their national honor, and this time they fight ferociously and win the day in Europe. Yeah. Good job, the French.
Yeah, the French Special Forces guy just describing what it would be like to go around in these almost ancient catacombs underneath your city and try to cleanse it of a zombie plague. Yeah, that. You look at me and tell me that wasn't a tense discussion. Like there was no tension when he's describing trying to wear this scuba gear going into pitch black water to cut a grate or something.
Yeah, the magnitude of the failure on the part of Hollywood to get the good movie out of this book, it astounds me.
Can we take 5 minutes and talk about how World War Z the movie?
Let's rant.
World War Z the movie is terrible. Brad Pitt, you couldn't save it. You did your best.
It was color by numbers, made for TV zombie movie.
The only thing that they did that they tried to do right was talk about how Israel turtled up and had the walls and kept the population separate and was doing that. But even that they screwed up by letting the zombies, 1, be fast, and 2, climb over the walls and actually get into the city and start overrunning it. Why? We didn't need that.
It was lame.
It was bad.
Lame movie.
The movie was terrible.
I'm not even going to give it the dignity of a long rant.
It was bad. Don't watch it. Nothing like the book.
Okay. So, and I'll normally challenge the perception of the movie wasn't as good as the book, but in this case, it wasn't even close. Okay, so the 5th section is the goodbyes. So now it's kind of, all right, so somehow we defeated the zombies. Yeah, even if one lives, they could restart the outbreak, but we figured them out. It's
what?
It's like in The Princess Bride after they've been in the fire swamp for a while. Be like, yeah, there's lots of dangers in the fire swamp, but once you get to know them, you can handle it.
Well, and he even talked about in certain places, other parts of the book, they talk about they have different self-sustaining societies or they're building houses on stilts now, and that's like a standard thing where you can pull up the ladder and just be safe. There are children that have been born that didn't live through the zombie war, and they just know you don't play with water. You don't go out in the woods by yourself. You
follow the rules.
Yeah, exactly. There are rules. You can stay safe when you've eliminated the vast majority of the zombie threat. Because again, one slow, shambling zombie is not a threat if you know how to deal with it.
I'm imagining this like a mom, like the same mom lecture, like don't go out in the street, you might get hit by a car, and don't get in a van with the man who's trying to give you free candy. And if you see a zombie, just that's part of the mom advice now.
You honestly, think about a post-World War Z world where I can see YouTube videos or TikToks of guys at a soccer game and a zombie comes out of the woods and somebody calls the cops and somebody else takes a picnic table and pins it down. A couple of guys just all right, just keep him here until somebody comes to off him.
Yeah, or people would just carry around battle axes or something. There was a lot where he went into that. I kind of got bored with the talk of, what weapons are effective against zombies, and it's better to have, ornamental relics out of the Tower of England than it is to have a modern rifle.
Well, here's the thing, Ben, and if you read the Zombie Survival Guide, you would know this. This is a rule that is very important. Blades don't have to be reloaded.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, so then in the goodbyes section, it's 10 years later. Cuba is now the world's best democracy.
Yeah, because and it's interesting. You had a whole chapter talking about how Cuba became an economic and democratic powerhouse.
Right, because they already had an autocratic society, which made them the perfect place to defend against the zombie apocalypse. And then they were able to make a seamless transition to free-flowing, capitalist democracy, and they became the richest place in the world.
And he talked about Fidel Castro at the time, because he was still alive back then, claiming responsibility for it.
Victory.
Yeah, it's all right, you know what? I am graciously going to allow you all to become a democratic, capitalistic nation because I'm such a good person.
Yeah. Tibet is freed from China, and the world's most populous city is there. Russia, like you said, becomes the Holy Russian Empire, an expansionist theocracy. Kind of like there was a little bit of a hint of like the Handmaid's Tale kind of thing going on there in Russia with trying to repopulate now that everyone's turned into zombies.
Yeah, and like that's horrifying, but like totally a thing that like if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen in Russia.
Yeah. So at the end, there's this tone of like hope for the future because humans were resourceful and we've survived and we're rebuilding. Yeah, we nuked our climate and, the world is in ruin, but we're okay and we're stronger and we learned our lesson and we're moving forward.
Hooray! Yay for everyone.
So that's about all I had to say about the content of the book. I want to talk a little bit for just the last few minutes about zombies in pop culture.
All right, and after that, we need to put a bow on all of it. So go ahead about zombies in general.
Okay, so they've almost become ubiquitous. I mean, you can go back to those early films by like George Romero and stuff where it introduced the idea, and then as more and more people added to the zombie canon, it started to proliferate and then spill beyond the boundaries of the horror genre. In the recent years, we've had zombie war films, zombie romance films, zombie comedy films, zombie drama films. I mean, it's like a subgenre that you can tack onto any other genre now.
I have said on this podcast that if you're making a video game, there are 3 things that you can kill en masse, and parents aren't going to get mad at you for doing it.
It won't increase your bad rating.
Yeah, exactly. It's aliens, Nazis, and zombies.
Mm-hmm. So, video games. What video games can you think of that have zombies as their like main thing? Like lots.
So not the main thing, but a lot of the Call of Duty franchises have a zombie mode where they put you as a first-person shooter video game with guns. They put you in like a building or some scenario like that, and then the zombies just try to break in, and you have to defend multiple points of ingress and that kind of thing. There is a game that I've wanted to play forever that's a co-op multiplayer called Left 4 Dead. And
Yes, I played it.
Oh, okay, there you go. Up to 4 players. You have to get from point A to point B in a zombie apocalypse, and you all have to work together.
Yep. Good one. Half-Life was kind of a zombie movie, but it was caused by space aliens instead of a virus.
Totally doesn't count. Yeah, those are head crab zombies. Totally different thing.
It totally counts.
Different thing entirely.
Why does that not count? They're still human beings.
That's an alien takeover of your head. Like the aliens ate the person's head and then took over the body. Totally different thing.
Let me go back to my magic system list. Okay, here are the rules of zombies. They don't feel pain. They live through things that would kill ordinary humans. They recognize each other. They don't and can't speak. They have variable strength and speed, focus and patience, and the cause varies. It meets all those rules except for eating flesh.
I feel like I played a lot more Half-Life than you because head crab zombies can be killed just like any other normal person. Like they're not any more resilient because they're a zombie. They are just the person bodies taken over by the head crab, the alien thing.
I feel like that's not one of the rules, but okay.
You just said they should be able to live through things that would kill a human.
All right. But that's one of the things that varies in different versions of zombies.
Man, don't you but if me.
Okay, but it's that they can't be scared, and there's like you talked about the shock and awe thing that was utterly ineffective.
All right. That's
or feeling pain.
If it lets us move on, I will give you head crab zombies as a type of zombie.
Plants vs. Zombies. They're like cute zombies,
cartoony things. Yeah,
just silly. It's like my kids can do it. It's okay. They're just killing zombies.
Yeah, because they're zombies. They're not real people.
But one of my all-time favorite pieces of zombie pop culture, and I think it hits the sweet spot and it just is surfing the peak of the zombie subgenre pop culture wave, is Jonathan Coulton's song "All We Want to Do Is Eat Your Brains." Or "Read Your Brains." Have you heard this song?
I've not heard this song, no.
Oh, man, it is beautiful. I'll read you the first verse. "Hey, ya, Tom, it's Bob from the office down the hall. It's good to see you, buddy. How you been? Things have been okay with me, except for I'm a zombie now. I really wish you'd let us in. I think I speak for all of us when I say I understand why you folks might hesitate to submit to our demands, but here's an FYI, you're all going to die. All we want to do is eat your brains." Excellent song. I'll put a link in the show notes. You'll love it. It's fantastic. It's satirical and great.
So you and I both listened to the audiobook version of this, which was a star-studded all-star cast. If you're going to listen to this book, you're hearing this podcast and you still haven't listened to it and you're interested now that you've heard us talk about it, I mean, it's a who's who. You got Nathan Fillion from Firefly. Carl Reiner from the Oceans franchise. His brother Rob. Simon Pegg, also of a famous zombie genre, Shaun of the Dead. Martin Scorsese, the director. Frank Darabont, the director of Shawshank Redemption. Alan Alda from the MASH franchise. Alfred Molina, Dr. Octopus from the mid-2000 Spider-Man movie. Just on and on and on. Mark Hamill. Luke Skywalker himself. We can't have a podcast without mentioning Star Wars. Jerry Ryan from the Star Trek franchise. I mean, just super good. Way good audio production. I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the production. I think you knew I would like this, and I liked it because of the fact that we set up this magic system and then we use it to look at the world. And it's an interesting way to think about Russian culture and Japanese culture and Chinese culture and American culture, and what are our virtues worth preserving and being grateful for, and what are our weaknesses that could potentially be our downfall. And I thought that is what to me makes good fiction.
Excellent. This is exactly where I wanted to go for the wrap up of this, because I knew you would like this book because, like I said before you read it, this is unlike any zombie thing that you've ever consumed in media. And for kind of the same reason, I like it because it is such a unique take on storytelling. The way that he does it, and Max Brooks is just so brave by digging deep into like these different things. Like, there are so many stories that just all of the zombie things that you rattled off, all of the different zombie movies that exist, focus on one tiny aspect of the zombie apocalypse, and they hand wave everything else away. Like, oh, the zombie apocalypse happened. We're not worried about that. This is the story we're telling. And he really took on this challenge of what would the zombie apocalypse look like on a global scale, like really, and all of the different details of it. And in this admittedly kind of a short book, really like satisfied my craving for understanding how big and impactful and just all encompassing something like this would be. Everything from like the director of some U.S. bureaucracy organization talking about the specific logistics of retraining like Hollywood executives to be janitors, all the way down to one woman talking about how they didn't have the right sleeping bags and it was super cold this winter. Like the whole gambit of just how big something like this would be. And he did it so well, and it's great.
Yeah, I agree. Not all of the vignettes were home runs for me. Some of them, like, yeah, this is a waste of time. But you can push through it. And like you said, it was breathtaking, the ambition of how completely he took on this monumentous task of, I'll go back to the thing, a collection of individual accounts narrated by an agent of the United Nations Post-War Commission following the devastating global conflict against the zombie plague.
You could sit and think about the zombie apocalypse for 10 years, and then this book will still surprise you with one little facet of it in one of these chapters.
Yeah. Yep. Recommended. Well done, Max Brooks.
All right, Magic System, A through F.
Okay, so this is one of the places I had a problem. And I get that there's some hand waving going on here, but just the physiology of how a human being works, it just went well into the space of utter magic.
Well, I mean, that's fine. But is it a hard or soft magic system? Because we listen to Lord of the Rings, where freaking Gandalf is like summoning eagles from nowhere. So I mean, like, if we're gonna get nitpicky about what magic can and can't do, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is hard or soft magic. Did we understand the boundaries of the magic system in this sense?
Yes. Hard magic system.
We didn't understand it, but we knew what the limitations were. We knew what the outer edges were.
It was knowable.
Yes. Like, how it happened, how it started, how it ends, we don't understand. What we do understand is once somebody is a zombie, these are the rules that they have to abide by, and they were very consistent. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Hard magic. That's what zombies are.
Okay. So did we, as the reader, understand the rules of the magic system? I'd say we did. And I think he utilized the limitations of that to his maximum advantage.
I mean, that's really the story that he was telling. Is on a global scale, this is the situation we were confronted with. How do we first identify and then exploit the limitations that he has set forth in that scenario? Like, that really is what the whole book was about.
Yeah, and then the third rule is, use what you got before you add something new. There was a little bit of that going on with like zombies walking around on the ocean floor and stuff like that. I don't think that was necessary.
It's an interesting concept, the idea that there are these roaming hordes of zombies in the ocean. So it's never really going to be over. There's always going to be them down there. But I don't mark him down for that, honestly. I think it's more interesting than it is detracting.
Okay, so I'll say hard magic system, and I'll give it a B.
Hard magic, and I'm giving it an A. I cannot get enough of this book. Like, it's just so good in so many different ways.
Okay.
Recommended.
Cool. All right. There is something I've been holding off on that I've been meaning to do for a long time, and that is several episodes ago. I can't even remember, like 2 or 3 episodes ago, I said that from my time in Florida and my relationship that I developed with the manager of the hotel I was staying at for 6 months, when I left, he gave me 3 $25 gift cards to the Cheesecake Factory. I'll tell the story at some point in the future about why the Cheesecake Factory, but I didn't need these, so I offered to give them to listeners, and the listeners I was going to choose, you and I selected at random from the list of people who have liked our page on Facebook. So if you have not yet liked our page on Facebook, please do so now. Go to Facebook, go to the Bad at Magic page and like us, and occasionally we'll give you free stuff. Now here's the weird part, Josh. We picked 3 names at random, and I picked them out, and I reached out to those 3 people. 2 of them, I was able to, get a mailing address and send them the card. The third person, I think, may have mistaken me for a Nigerian prince. Because they didn't know me, and all they got was like an instant message in Facebook Messenger saying, hey, give me your address and I'll send you a $25 gift card to the Cheesecake Factory.
Oh, for crying out loud, Ben. That's not how you open that conversation.
Oh, man. So I could not get that person to respond, but I don't know why. So I'm no longer going to try. I'm taking it back. If you're out there, Jose, I'm sorry. You wouldn't answer my instant messages. I'm sending your gift card to someone else. But congratulations to Jeff and Bill, our listeners. And if you want to interact, if you want to tell us about your car's name, if you want to tell us about which streaming music service you've chosen and why, or if you want to give us your thoughts on World War Z, join us on our subreddit or on Facebook, and you can be part of the discussion as well.
If you like what we talk about, consider recommending us to a friend. I feel like that's the least you can do. If you like us, maybe your friend will like us too. If you really want to do us a favor, consider taking your phone out of your pocket right now and giving us a good rating on the podcast player of your choice. It is insane the amount of visibility we can get from one person giving us a 5-star review. If you love us, if you just cannot get enough of Ben talking about the inane little things about how he trains his kids to be better people, consider becoming patrons on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.